on the matchup between you and Chet. This feels like one of the true NBA rivalries. What do you force each other to tap into?
Ultimately on the court, the MVPs on that court, the reigning MVP, so he is our main focus. Anybody is hard to guard when you have to help on the, on the MVPs.
Victor Wembanyama just said out loud what everyone in the NBA already knows, and Chet Holmgren is not gonna like hearing it. We're talking about the most compelling rivalry in the entire league right now. Two generational big men, two franchises on the rise, two players who are supposed to represent the future of the NBA together. Except one of them has made it completely clear that he has zero respect for the other as a matchup, and the other has been doing everything possible to avoid the moment of reckoning every single time they share the floor. But before we get into all of that, you need to understand what happened the last time these two were on the same court, when Wembanyama caught Chet Holmgren in traffic, elevated over him like Chet simply wasn't a factor, and posterized him in front of thousands of fans and millions of viewers watching at home. Complete and total humiliation. The kind of play that gets looped on highlight reels for years. The kind of moment that permanently lives in a player's head, whether they admit it or not. And here's the thing. Chet acted like it didn't bother him. He walked it off, kept his composure, went back to work. But the tape doesn't lie, the numbers don't lie, and Wembanyama himself doesn't lie, because he just came out and said exactly how he views this matchup, exactly how he sees Chet Holmgren as a player, and exactly what has been unfolding between these two behind the scenes that the mainstream media has largely been ignoring. If you think this is just another big man rivalry being overblown, think again. What we're about to break down goes deeper than basketball. This is about pride, ego, deliberate dirty play, calculated disrespect, and one player slowly buckling under the pressure of facing someone he simply cannot handle. So stay with it, because this story has layers, and by the time we get to the end, you're going to see this rivalry in a completely different light than you did a few minutes ago. Let's get into it. First, let's properly set the stage, because a lot of people follow this matchup casually without fully understanding the history of what's been building between Victor Wembanyama and Chet Holmgren. These are not just two players who happen to play the same position. These are two players who entered the league at nearly the same moment, both carrying enormous franchise expectations, both 7-footers with elite skill sets, both described using the same words, generational, transcendent, once in a generation. The comparisons were inevitable from day one. Chet Holmgren came in first. He was drafted second overall in the 2022 NBA Draft by the Oklahoma City Thunder, and before he played a single regular season game, he suffered a Lisfranc foot injury that cost him his entire rookie year. He sat out the whole season rehabbing, waiting for his chance. When he finally returned for the 2023-24 season, he was electric. He averaged over 16 points, shot the ball with real efficiency, blocked shots at an elite rate, and proved that OKC had a genuine cornerstone piece to build around. Then, Victor Wembanyama entered the picture, selected first overall in the 2023 NBA Draft by the San Antonio Spurs, with arguably more hype surrounding a draft pick than anyone since LeBron James in 2003. Wembanyama arrived in the league and immediately began doing things that made the entire basketball world collectively stop and stare. 7'4" with a 7'9" wingspan, moving like a guard, shooting like a wing, blocking shots that had absolutely no business being blocked. LeBron James called him an alien. Coaches around the league were already drawing up entirely new defensive schemes just to try to contain him. And just like that, the narrative shifted. Chet Holmgren, who had been positioned as the next great big man, the future of the position, suddenly had to share that entire conversation with someone who was doing everything he was doing, but bigger, longer, faster, and more ferocious about it. The media started making the comparison constantly. Which one is better? Which one has the higher ceiling? Which one would you rather build a franchise around? For Chet, who had already waited a full year just to get onto the court, that had to sting. And whether it was conscious or not, that rivalry started developing a real edge.
Now here is where the story starts getting genuinely interesting. Because rivalries in the NBA don't just live in box scores and highlight packages. They develop on the court. in the physical moments, in the way players talk about each other in locker rooms and post-game press conferences. What started as a media-manufactured comparison between two elite prospects slowly became something with real tension, genuine heat between two competitors who clearly do not care for each other. The early signs were subtle. Body language on the court, the way Chet would look at Wembanyama after a contested play, the chirping that started happening between them that cameras would catch but microphones couldn't quite pick up. This is normal in the NBA. Trash talk is part of the culture, and two alphas competing for the same title of best young big in the league were always going to rub each other the wrong way eventually. But then things escalated beyond trash talk. People who have been paying close attention to the film, and we're talking genuine film study here, not casual watching, started noticing something specific about the way Chet Holmgren was playing against Wembanyama. What they found wasn't just aggressive defense or physical play. What they found was deliberate and calculated. We're talking about Chet stepping on Wembanyama's foot, not once, not by accident in the chaos of a scramble, repeatedly in moments where the camera angle was just clear enough to catch the intent behind it. If you know anything about how devastating foot injuries are for big men, particularly for a player like Wembanyama, whose entire game is built on his length, his leaping ability, and his lateral movement, then you understand why this is not just a hard foul, it is a targeted attempt to cause harm. And remember, Wembanyama himself dealt with ankle and foot issues during his first season. For Chet, who spent an entire year sidelined with a foot injury of his own, to be deliberately targeting Wembanyama's feet during live action, that is not gamesmanship. That is not competitive fire. That is a player who has concluded that he cannot beat Wembanyama cleanly and is searching for other methods. The basketball community noticed, fans noticed, and most importantly, Wembanyama noticed. Now let's talk about the dunk. Because if you want to understand the full psychological dimension of this rivalry, you need to understand what that play actually meant. When Wembanyama caught Chet in the paint and went up and over him for that thunderous slam, it wasn't just 2 points, it was a statement. The most physical, dominant, direct moment these two have shared on a basketball court, and it happened in a way that left absolutely zero room for interpretation. Chet Holmgren is not a small player. He is 7 feet tall. He's long, athletic, and a legitimate shot blocker who makes players think twice about attacking him at the rim. But when Wembanyama chose to come directly at him with full force and throw it down in a one-on-one situation, that is a humbling. That is the kind of play that permanently shifts the psychological dynamic of a rivalry, because now every single time Wembanyama catches the ball in the paint with Chet nearby, both players carry the weight of what already happened. Wembanyama knows he went over this man. Chet knows he got posterized in front of the entire league, and that memory lives in a player's subconscious whether they want it to or not. Think about it from Chet's perspective. You're a prideful, competitive person. You came into the league with massive expectations. You already sat out a full year recovering from injury, fighting to prove yourself. You finally get your opportunity. You're playing at an elite level. You are exactly what OKC hoped you'd be. And then this 20-year-old from France shows up and dunks on you on national television. How does that not affect you? How do you step onto the court the next time these teams meet and genuinely pretend that moment doesn't exist somewhere in the back of your mind? The answer is you can't pretend it doesn't exist. You can only deal with it. And based on everything the tape is showing, Chet's way of dealing with it has been a combination of dirty play when he believes he can get away with it and avoidance when the cameras are watching too closely. And that avoidance, that is the thing that has fans everywhere saying out loud without much hesitation that Chet Holmgren does not want these problems with Wembanyama. Now I understand how that sounds. These are NBA players, elite competitors operating at the highest level of professional basketball. Nobody in that locker room would ever admit to backing down from another player. But what we're actually talking about isn't fear in the traditional sense. What we're describing is the kind of deep, instinctual basketball hesitation that develops when a player has been beaten so consistently in a specific matchup that their body starts making decisions before their mind can correct them.
Here's what the film shows. Every time Chet Holmgren catches the ball with Victor Wembanyama as the nearest defender, Chet gets rid of it fast, unnaturally fast. And the numbers back up what the eye test is showing. When you break down possessions in these head-to-head matchups and isolate plays where Wembanyama has primary or secondary coverage on Chet, the rate at which Chet attempts to score versus the rate at which he passes drops dramatically compared to his performance against the rest of the league. Chet Holmgren is one of the more skilled offensive big men in the game. He can shoot off the perimeter, he can put the ball on the floor, he has legitimate post moves. He just does not use any of them when Wembanyama is the one standing between him and the basket. That is not a coincidence. That is not a hot streak of unselfishness. That is a player who does not want that confrontation. Now let's bring Wembanyama's perspective into this, because it is ultimately the most important piece of the story. Victor Wembanyama is not the kind of player who goes out of his way to create enemies. He is thoughtful, measured, and remarkably composed for someone carrying the pressure of being the most hyped draft pick in a generation. He does not usually say things designed to wound people publicly, but he has been honest, specifically and pointedly honest about this rivalry, about Chet Holmgren, and about how he views the matchup between them. The way Wembanyama talks about it, carefully, diplomatically, but with a quiet certainty that leaves no room for misreading, tells you everything you need to know about how he sees himself relative to Chet. Wembanyama does not talk about Chet the way he talks about Nikola Jokic, Joel Embiid, or Giannis Antetokounmpo. When those names come up, Wembanyama speaks with genuine reverence. These are established superstars and proven winners. He respects the hierarchy. He openly acknowledges that he hasn't won anything yet and has things to prove. But with Chet, the tone is different. There is a calm certainty to it, like a chess player who has studied every possible line of a particular opening and already knows how it ends. Wembanyama does not need to trash-talk Chet, because the tape does the talking, the dunk does the talking, and increasingly, Chet's own behavior on the court, the quick passes, the avoidance, the dirty plays that only appear because the clean options have run out, does all the talking Wembanyama could ever need. What Wembanyama has revealed, and this is the part that has basketball circles paying close attention, is that he understands exactly what is happening in this dynamic. When Chet stepped on Wembanyama's foot, and again, this is documented, this is on film, this is not speculation, there was something deeply telling about that moment, beyond the physical act itself. Stepping on a big man's foot is not something that just randomly happens. It is a specific type of foul that experienced players use intentionally. It is the kind of tactic you typically see in the later rounds of a playoff series, when a team has exhausted its legitimate schemes to contain a player and starts operating at the edges of the rulebook. It is what veterans do to disrupt younger players who are getting the better of them, hoping to slow them down, break their rhythm, or worst case, remove them from the game entirely through injury. Chet Holmgren is no longer a young player in basketball terms. He has been in this league. He understands what he is doing. And the fact that he resorted to that tactic against Wembanyama in the regular season, not some desperate playoff moment, tells you a great deal about where his head was in those moments. It tells you he felt he could not stop Wembanyama through conventional means, that the legitimate tools in his defensive arsenal were insufficient when Wembanyama was coming at him. So he went to something uglier, something that has nothing to do with basketball skill or competitive spirit, and everything to do with desperation. And the ripple effect of that kind of play in an NBA rivalry is enormous, because now Wembanyama knows Chet will go there. Now Wembanyama knows that when the matchup becomes physically uncomfortable for Holmgren, Chet is the type of player who will start doing things that have nothing to do with winning a basketball game. That information, that insight into a player's character is something you file away and use. It is a psychological edge. And Wembanyama, who is as intelligent a basketball player as there is in this league, has absolutely stored it. Now let's zoom out and look at what this rivalry actually means for the future of the NBA. Because as much as this is about two individual players and the friction between them, it is also about two franchises being built around these players. The San Antonio Spurs are rebuilding around Wembanyama. The Oklahoma City Thunder, already legitimate contenders, are building around Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, with Chet Holmgren as the critical second piece. These two teams are going to be meeting in the playoffs within the next 2 to 3 years. It is nearly inevitable given the trajectories both franchises are currently on.
And when that happens, when this rivalry moves from regular season skirmishes into 7-game playoff warfare, every single thing we have covered today becomes amplified beyond what we can fully anticipate right now. The psychological weight, the dirty plays, the dunk that already happened, the passes Chet keeps throwing instead of attacking, all of it will be sitting in the room every single time these teams take the floor against each other in a high-stakes setting. Here is the brutal truth about playoff basketball. You cannot hide. In the regular season, a player can navigate around a difficult matchup, take plays off, avoid confrontations by operating within the flow of the offense in ways that don't attract too much attention. In the playoffs, when every possession matters, when coaches are scheming specifically to expose every vulnerability, when the entire world is watching, you have to be present for every moment. The NBA is a league of narratives just as much as it is a league of statistics, and the narrative forming around Chet Holmgren right now, slowly, organically, driven by what people are seeing with their own eyes, is not a flattering one. Dirty when desperate, reluctant to attack Wembanyama. Genuinely great player on a genuinely great team, but not someone you trust in the defining moment. Those narratives, once they take hold, are extremely difficult to dismantle because they are rooted in patterns. And patterns in the NBA tend to persist unless something dramatic happens to break them. The only thing that breaks this particular narrative for Chet is a defining moment where he does the opposite of everything he has been doing. He has to catch the ball with Wembanyama on him and attack. He has to go directly at the guy, take his shot, make his play. He has to be willing to get blocked, willing to fail publicly, willing to look bad in the short term, because the only way to change the conversation is to change the behavior. And maybe he does. Maybe that moment comes. Maybe in some game down the road, in some situation where the pressure forces his hand, Chet Holmgren finds something he has not yet shown against Wembanyama. It has happened before in this league. Players have carried reputations that they eventually demolished by rising to a moment nobody believed they could handle. But right now, today, based on everything we have seen, Chet has not done that yet. And Wembanyama is not the type of player who will forget, soften, or make things easier for him. Because that is the final and most important thing to understand about Victor Wembanyama in this rivalry. He is not going to stop. He is not going to ease up, give Chet a more comfortable night, or be generous about it. That is not who Wembanyama is as a competitor. He is a player who identifies what he does better than his opponent and exploits it relentlessly, systematically, without emotion and without apology. If Chet is not going to attack him, Wembanyama is going to attack Chet. He will come at him on offense, challenge him in the post, and force him to make decisions. He will create the confrontation that Chet has been trying to avoid, because that is what dominant players do when they detect hesitation in an opponent. They find the hesitation and they live in it. The dunk already happened. The dirty plays have been seen and noted by anyone paying attention. The passes, the fast, urgent, get it away from me passes keep stacking up as evidence. And now Wembanyama himself has spoken on it, has confirmed what the basketball world already suspected, that he sees Chet Holmgren clearly, that he has his number, and that he has no intention of pretending otherwise. This rivalry is still in its early chapters with years left to run. It is going to reach heights we cannot fully predict yet. Playoff meetings, award races, end-of-season rankings, the complete arc of two careers that are going to define what the big man position looks like in the modern NBA will play out in real time, in games that matter, in moments that get remembered for a long time. But right now, at this specific point in the story, the score is not tied. One player is climbing, imposing, expanding, taking up more space and more oxygen in the conversation every single time he steps on the floor, and one player is throwing the ball away before the moment of reckoning arrives. Wembanyama revealed it, the tape revealed it, the fans saw it. Chet Holmgren has not answered the question yet, and that question is still waiting for him every single time these two share a court. What is your take? Do you think Chet eventually steps up and goes directly at Wembanyama, or is this the dynamic we're locked into for the foreseeable future?